So, today, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about none other than the purple worm.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, let's get right into it.
So, you're probably wondering, a purple worm. It's just a big worm. Well, you're correct, but there's a little bit more description of this purple worm. It is a gargantuan monster.
Yes.
Humongous.
Its size is especially important. That's basically its whole thing. It's just a worm that burrows, but it's gargantuan.
So it's humongous.
It's about as big as you can get almost. And that is extremely important. So I like to imagine the worms from Dune. If you've seen the new movie. But they typically do have a mouth in the front, kind of like Dune. It can be circular, but there are a lot of variants, some of which have like flaps to them or just straight up like jaws or fangs.
Or just a hole of teeth.
Or just a hole of teeth like in Dune. But they do typically have a stinger at the back end, which is unlike Dune.
Yes.
And that's what they look like. I mean, what else do you
Well, there's more. Well, first off, you're like, I can stab a worm. Easy peasy. When you go to stab, your sword breaks. They have very high armor. More of like a
carapace.
A carapace. Very high, mucusy, slimy, purple carapace. And it actually gets its purple color from the mucus. But also protruding from the purple worm are spikes that it will use to move through the tunnels, kind of like in Tremors. If you haven't seen that movie, it's basically mini purple worms that eat people. But yeah, basically. And if you look very, very closely, they actually have 4 eyes.
True.
Yeah, but they're basically blind, so they're kind of useless. But yeah, that's basically it. Their stinger is about half the size of a person. And the width of their mouth can eat an entire rhino whole. So,
yes.
Yeah.
You don't want to get caught in the mouth of a purple worm.
Yeah,
all right, so that's what they look like. Their personality on a basic sense, well, actually, there is no more than a basic sense. They're so basic, there's really not much to say about them. But
they have the lowest intelligence.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Yeah.
But in the as basic as you can get it, they are basically forces of nature. They are these giant worms that all they do is go towards sound. That's it. So that's all I'm going to give for the basics here. We'll get more into it since there's not that much more to get into. But for now, let's get right into stats.
Alrighty. I can start off with stats. So basically, this is a CR15 monster. So really high monster.
13,000 XP if you kill it.
Yes. It makes sense because a lot of people who interact with purple worms do call them natural disasters, which is pretty cool, which gives them their high CR. Their AC is 18, the same as full plate armor, so very strong. They have a very strong hide. Their HP is generally 247 hit points. That is a lot.
It is.
It's a lot, and it can max between, I believe, 350. I think that's it.
Yeah, you roll 12 d20s plus 90. So a ton of hit points.
Maybe even 400. Who knows? That would be like the queen purple worm, the big one.
Yeah.
Yeah. But their speed is 50 feet when they're on land, but they can burrow in sands and dirts for 30 feet.
And rock.
And solid rock, but that's a ability we'll get into later.
They can burrow anything. And if they're burrowing, it's 30 feet speed.
Yes, but we'll get into that. Some materials
you just made like very specific examples, but they can actually do all of everything.
It can, but some stuff is not 30 feet.
You mean 50 feet?
No. When it goes on land, when it's just like slugging, it's 50 feet. When it burrows in dirt or movable materials, it's 30. Some materials give it a hard time, which we'll get into its ability, which I could talk about now.
I see.
The tunneler ability.
All right, yeah.
Which basically, if it in the core of the planet or in the mantle of the planet, there are bedrock, solid rock, minerals, hard rocks it has to get through, so it's not as easy. So with this ability, it can go through all of those, but it only goes half its burrow speed.
Okay.
But when it does go through it, it does leave a 10-foot wide tunnel behind it.
Yep.
So, pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, so nothing can stop it, although some things can slow it.
Yes. No walls, not really anything. They can get through any defense. So
Yeah, a wall would basically be nothing.
Yeah,
it's not dense enough to really slow their speed.
Plus, they would probably just go under it, too, so it doesn't even matter.
True.
Yeah, so, but we'll get into some of their saving throws. They get a plus 11 con. And this is kind of interesting, but they get a plus 4 to wisdom. So pretty cool stuff.
Yep.
I can talk about their base stats, which is their strength is a plus 9. So one of the strongest creatures in Dungeons and Dragons. Their dexterity, they're a big fat worm, so they only get a minus 2. Their con is pretty high with a plus 6. Their intelligence is a minus 5. Their wisdom is a minus 1. And their charisma is a minus 3.
Yeah, so something to notice here is their mind is non-existent. They are about as close to a non-living, inanimate object as you can get.
Yes.
Yeah, they're basically rocks that just move around.
They eat rocks.
Yeah. They eat rocks, and you are what you eat, right?
Yep.
Okay. Their senses, they have blind sight up to 30 feet, so it's pretty short range. But they have tremor sense up to 60 feet, and their passive perception is 9. So they're not very perceptive, but they do have a very unique form of perceiving, which is their tremor sense.
And if you do think if you can outsneak it, if you do get within its blind sight, it will detect you.
Yeah, blind sight's pretty much an automatic seeing.
Yeah.
But if you're
unless you're
outside
hiding magically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. And they speak no languages because they are very dumb. Okay. So, I have this. They have a pretty simple or a small number of attacks, but their attacks are somewhat intricate. So I have it pretty laid out. So you want to go into it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So these are their attacks. So we've talked about all their abilities. All they had was Tunneler. We've talked about all their stats. They have 2 abilities. They have Bite and they have Tail Stinger. And on every turn, they have multi-attack. And so they can take 1 attack from each of those options. So they can take 1 Bite and 1 Stinger each turn. So this is what each one does. I'm going to start with the Tail Stinger because it's the simpler one. So the Tail Stinger stings for about 19 on average damage, piercing damage. Not that bad. So it's 3d6s plus 9. But if you get stung, you have to make a DC 19 con save, which is fairly high. And if you fail it, you take 42 on average poison damage. That's 12 d6s, and you take half on a success.
So generally, if you get hit, that's like 50 damage.
Yeah, that's big time poison right there.
Yeah, purple worms actually have the strongest poison in D&D. If you want to buy their poison, that's like 1,500 gold.
Yeah, which is interesting to me because part of what I thought was the reason that this was so high damage is because if you get hit with its stinger, it probably pumps a ton into you. You know what I mean?
It's humongous. Yeah.
It's humongous, but it is also known to be extremely potent. So that's a bad combo for the person that gets stung.
Yeah, actually in older editions, if you got stung, if you failed the con save, it would just outright kill you.
Yeah.
There's it just doesn't care. It's like, yeah, you're barbarian, you think you're all cool level 20, you're just dead.
Yeah.
Gone.
That definitely made them scarier.
Yeah.
But I think it's for the best that that's not the case.
Yeah.
But still, you're not going to last too long if you keep getting stung. So anyway, their bite, though, is actually more interesting.
Ooh.
So their bite, if you get bit, it's basically the equivalent of getting mowed down by just a giant lawnmower or something, where it's just a hole of serrated teeth. So it's less of a bite and more of you get crushed by pointy teeth.
Well, I feel like you just fall in it. You do. And then it just gets kind of like how a fish eats, kind of sucks you up like a vacuum.
Yeah, it's kind of like a pit trap with spears, but from all sides.
Yeah. Basically, yeah.
So if you fall in, or it makes you get eaten, you take 22 damage on average. So that's 3d8s plus 9. But if you are large size or lower, so anything lower than a large creature, you need to make a DC 19 Dex save, which again is pretty high, unless you're a rogue. or you get swallowed. And this is where things get interesting. So the base damage, it's not crazy, but getting swallowed is where things get problematic for you. So a swallowed creature is blinded and restrained.
Oof.
It has total cover from outside attacks and effects, which you might think is like, oh, that's nice. I won't get attacked from the outside. Well, that's kind of like the only way. That basically means you cannot be helped, right? No one can cast a spell and help you out. You're stuck in there on your own.
It's you versus the stomach of the beast.
Yep, pretty much. Also, a creature that is swallowed takes 21, and that's 66's acid damage at the start of the worm's turn. So that's every round. You're going to be taking 21 damage on average, 21 damage, and it's not much you can really do to get out. However, there is one thing you can do to get out, and your party members can do to help you out. And that's if the worm takes 30 damage or more in one turn, the worm has to make a DC 21 con save, which is very high, or regurgitate all the creatures that it's swallowed.
So that means it can swallow multiple people.
It can. And this also makes you as a DM a little more willing to get people swallowed, because you know that they're not just going to die. Like, there is a way for them to come out. And this is where the comic gets interesting, because it's like, you swallow, you puke, you swallow, you puke, and it's, like, fun. But I should note, it's a DC 21 con save for the worm, which is high, but they have a plus 11 to their con, like we said. So it's not that hard for them.
Yeah, so they have to make a 10 or below. Or
they have to make
a 10 and above, and then they're fine.
Yeah, a 10 or above, and they're fine. That's not hard to do at all.
Yeah.
Especially when their when their con is plus 6.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, but they're not using that. They're using the plus 11. But yeah, a 10 or above. Okay, the last thing that is relevant for the swallow here is if the worm does die while it's got creatures swallowed, those creatures are no longer restrained, and they can, like, climb out, basically.
Wait, so what's making you restrained?
Just the sheer force of its stomach, like, pushing you down, like, further down its body into its stomach.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Because, like, a worm is basically just a giant muscle, and so it's just, when you get swallowed, one muscle pushes you down, then the next one pushes you down, the next one pushes you down, and that's keeping you from, like, doing anything. Yeah. And that is its stat block.
It's still a pretty simple but deadly monster.
Yeah, and interesting. Not many creatures are big enough to just start swallowing the players.
I think the couple ones is like the Kraken and
anything big.
Some random one.
But these are kind of made to swallow.
Yeah, they literally swallow. That's all they move.
That's all they do.
To swallow things to move. So
yeah.